Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. I'm pleased to have with us tonight Mr. Harry Gross, who is the Chief of Research at the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute and an avowed Democrat, for better or worse. I'm sure you might change your mind on some
an
subject.
avowed liberal.
Maybe, I don't know if that's a good place for a liberal to land, but
that's why I have my fair share of disagreements with the Democratic Party. For that
yes, that's good. That's a good reasonable thing. Well, we've had a discussion about the courts and President Trump, and we went into a rather long conversation about the issues with immigration, and then some of President Trump's thoughts about that and the way the Supreme Court has responded to this, particularly with Mr. Garcia. Did I get his name right?
Yes, Alberto Garcia, yes.
Okay, great. Who was sent to El Salvador, apparently wrongly,
yes.
By the regulations that were in force. And I think the regulations required to be here illegally and to have committed a crime. Is that correct?
In part, that's one way.
I mean, in other words,
yes.
The question that I ask, and we'll get into this subject, is what all these other people were sent there? I don't know how many there were, into a really heinous situation. As I understand it, they were all illegal immigrants, whatever the phrase you wish to, here in the country illegally. And I think they had committed crimes. I'm not sure about that.
The thing is, we don't know that because none of them were given due process.
Well, so that's an important point. So the question would be, why were these people sent there? They committed crimes, they're here illegally, and I think they were members of some kind of heinous gang.
They've been alleged to be members of Tren de Agua.
Right. So the question would be, with these people, I mean, let's forget Mr. Gonzalez, if I got his name right.
Garcia,
okay. Mr. Garcia. But the other people that were sent there, now he seems to have been an exception. So he was wrongly sent there, meaning the implication is the other 100+ people were correctly sent there. What is the difference between a correct trip to the jail or an incorrect one?
Well,
what did not happen with him?
In this case, he was not the man they were looking for. They actually were trying to find someone else, and they picked him up by mistake and just put him on a plane without checking any of his.
Now, what allows the government to find someone? I'd ask that question. So, in other words, we're looking for people. They're out there and they're on the list. Are they on the list because they're gang members? They're on the list because they've committed crimes? They're here illegal.
Either they're suspected gang members or they're suspected of having gang ties. The key word here, though, is suspected in all of this, because the fundamental problem, and I want to make this clear just personally, I don't have an issue with deportation.
Yes.
What I have an issue with, and I think where the problem fundamentally with this whole situation is, and what's gotten Trump administration in trouble with the courts in this, is that there has been no attempt to prove these allegations.
Well, now, does the government have, in other words, a question that comes up if you're a non-citizen? I know there's Constitution has bounced around a lot about this, and one reason Guantanamo Bay has been used is presumably if the U.S. has some place that's not in that the U.S. occupies, that's not really part of the country, like Guantanamo Bay. Whatever they do there is outside the purview of the courts, I think. But
Guantanamo is a military installation.
I won't blunder too much into that. All right, okay.
But the Constitution, the Fifth Amendment, requires that all persons subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That means as long as you are not a foreign diplomat who has diplomatic immunity or a member of a foreign hostile army, which has to be declared through a declared war, in this sense, you are entitled to constitutional protections. That's been affirmed by several Supreme Court cases.
What about the Confederate soldiers?
Confederate soldiers actually would have been covered under the laws of war. So they would not have been accorded constitutional protections during the Civil War itself. After the Civil War, during Reconstruction, they would have been.
Maybe they changed their mind. They said, well, I've changed my mind. You put me in a prison here, but I'm really born in America. And I don't want to be in this prison.
Well, deserters would be treated differently than prisoners of war.
But
we're in a totally
off the subject.
Separate area.
Let's just get back.
Yeah, the fundamental point is that the regardless of your citizenship status, you are accorded constitutional protections in the United States.
So does that mean
area.
that if you're here, those 20 million or 15 million people here, to every single one of them, no matter how bad actors they are, our system is now, there's nothing we can do. You're here, we think you might be doing something in the wrong, you're covered with tattoos, gang things, and we can't do anything to you because you're in the country illegally, and therefore we have no ability. So if you're here, why would you ever go back?
Well,
I mean,
it's not
anybody
that we
that's
have no ability. It's that the government has a responsibility to prove their allegations, and those
that
people
they're
are
here,
entitled to their day in court.
isn't they're here illegally? That's the only allegation.
In that case, then you're still entitled to a court date. And usually,
let me ask
immigration proceedings tend to be very short
Well,
because
let's discuss that.
Are
and
you
so
here
a
illegally?
court date
Yes.
and due process. So if you said, all right, I want to run these 300 people through this room. So 300 people go in, prove you're here, prove you're a citizen. That's the question. No proof, next. Prove you're a citizen. No question, next.
I would actually the responsibility is not on the defendant to prove they're a citizen. It's on the government to prove they're not a citizen.
But so in other words, if you insist, it's not doable. So the question would be, and let's to get into that and Trump's arrangements with courts. So the courts they said that these people that were sent down to El Salvador. I was asking the question, why were they there or whatever. Only one person was there's any thought about. Only one of the 100.
There are actually several who've been extinct, but Alvaro Garcia has captured.
I know there are 100 people there that were on a list of some type, and they were all sent out of the country to a terrible place.
In defiance of a court order as well.
For every human, or just this one?
For all of them.
So
and the planes that carried them there were ordered by a judge to turn around.
Wasn't that referable to the one person on the plane?
No, that was actually before that.
So the courts have said, just to go through this, that anybody, at least this judge has, and which gets into this question. The judge, as my understanding is, and this went to the Supreme Court, and this may be an issue of consequence, because the bigger, as we started our little discussion, the bigger issue is President Trump is attempting to act by directives.
Yes.
And one of the situations that he faces is whatever number you want to say, 15 or 20 million, whatever, millions and millions of people that are having a tremendous impact on the country, rightly or wrongly. It's a huge number of people are here. And if it is said, and I'll ask this question, maybe I don't totally understand it. So right now, those 20 million people, no one could be forced out of the country, even if they had not kept their day. They're here, they missed their appointment, whatever the deal is. Once you cross the Rio Grande, there's no way for the government to do anything about it.
No, there's lots of ways for the government to do about it. Through arresting them, through taking them to a detention facility, through going through an immigration court. Frankly, if you for a lot of people, we actually know who they are because they've had to come through, particularly if they've overstayed a visa, we know who they are, or if they've applied for asylum, we know who they are. If you've crossed illegally and are truly undocumented and are part of that shadow kind of society in that sense of that exists in the cracks of all of this, we don't know them as well. That's more typical investigative work and mass roundup stuff.
I guess the question is there, and I know that there's been debates for at least the past 100 years. Does the Constitution follow the flag or not? I think that was the phrase, maybe particularly as the U.S. Took over the Philippines, for instance. So what was going on in the Filipino War or Puerto Rico, as far as that goes? Does the Constitution go there? And I think the idea was, well, it did, whatever that means. And so the rights and privileges that you could say American citizens treasure, in many ways, they're extended to anyone that's here, no matter. And then, is it practical to do anything about it? It's so difficult. And the question is, I made the case. Well, maybe what you could do is have someone sit in a chair, and the person walks in and the person, there's not a jury trial, is my understanding.
Yes.
There's just a person, and the question is not, can you prove that you're an American citizen? The question is for the judge to say, I'm going to prove you're not an American citizen, and also, would the person have a defense attorney?
No, because
Isn't that so?
Here's the thing: because it's a civil trial, you're only accorded the right to an attorney in a criminal trial. So one of the great inhumanities of our system is that unaccompanied minors are actually required to represent themselves, unless someone is going to do pro bono
so
work
these
for them.
these million now, just to understand this, because I think it's the point of consequence. So when I have observed this, the story is this person, and this shows my misunderstanding of it, at least the way it's appeared in the press or in television, is there was one person here who was, quote, a father, if I can phrase it that way. He had a child.
I think that makes you a father, yes.
Right, but his wife had a child, actually. But so he's presented as a really great person. He's there and whatever. And then somehow he was one of the 150, whatever the number was, that is a special situation for him in that his name was not on the list of people that were being picked up.
In part, and the government did not have any evidence against it. And the government admitted that they were not supposed to deport him, but they did it anyway. That's part of why his case has captured so much attention, is that the government has admitted they already made a mistake.
Well, I mean, I'll ask this question. How could the government say that the other 115 people or whatever they were fine to send them down? What would be the difference?
That's the difference is that they at least have some level, ideally, supposedly, of criminal evidence.
So as I understand it, and this is important, the courts have said you cannot, all those people, not just this guy. We don't care. We want every human being that the government has sent out, and there are big numbers of them. I mean, they're flying planes to Colombia.
Yes.
Every single person that has been put on those planes by the government, and there's not a big number because it's impossible to do it, but maybe, I don't know, 10,000, 5,000.
There haven't been that many. I think there have been
sent,
maybe 400, maybe they've been sent
so
down.
Very,
so far.
very few
Very few.
people. Very, very, very few. And to go through this story again about the plane, my understanding was the judge was issued not for the 115, but just for this person, because the government admitted it was wrongly there. But maybe is it every human being?
There are several different court orders around this. So the plane loads that took these guys down to El Salvador, that was done in violation of a court order because the government didn't prove that they were deportable effectively, and so they were not given their day in court. They were just put on a plane.
So every
and sent
single
out.
Now, what's the big difference with this guy? I mean,
this guy was basically disappeared. That masked men came, took him away, and when his family were like, "Hey, where did this guy go? What happened to my husband?" Then they found out that he was in ICE custody. And they were like, well, why is he in ICE custody? And the government said, oh, wait, we weren't actually supposed to arrest him. We don't have any proof that
just
he's
to ask this question.
Undocumented.
So I think there's an argument this guy was, at least at some point, a member of this Gang 13. I mean, markers.
Maybe. But
no, I think it's, I'll be neutral about it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got whatever it is the tattoos or a number of things. In my opinion, he would at least have some arrangement with the gangs. And now, the other thing I think about this that made this case special was, is my understanding, is that earlier a judge had said he'd never been granted asylum here, but somehow an earlier court arrangement was that we don't want you sent back to El Salvador because presumably you've established that your life would be in danger for gang reasons. So he had some protective order. And this, now I'll then get sort of after our long trip to get into the legal issues. So this case was by a federal district judge who issued an injunction or a demanding whatever. And then this went to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
It ruled 9-0
Yes.
that the government needs to bring the person back.
Yes.
Now, my understanding also is and I don't know how broad the court order was, but the word that was used was facilitate,
Yes.
which was sort of a weasel word.
Yes.
A facilitate means you have to assist in the process.
You have to make a good faith effort.
Right, and then the government has said, well, we did. We talked to the El Salvadorian.
But they haven't. Trump actually, in his interview that he did with Time Magazine over the weekend, said he has not asked Bukele, that his lawyers, he hasn't been directed by his lawyers to do anything, that he's waiting on.
The guy, I think he was on television saying he's not going to do the president,
Yes.
and for obvious reasons, but he's not going to do it. And so the question is, I believe, this legal dispute might be centered around the word facilitate.
I mean, even then, fundamentally, the legal dispute here to me is.
And that's just for is it for the whole 115?
It's just for this guy.
Just
right
for this
now.
guy.
Just for this guy.
So the government did, and how is that possible? If the judge is, did the appellate courts say, well, the government has some kind of claim for the other 114 people?
Well,
this guy,
the other one, there was not a class action lawsuit. It was just this was action on behalf of him by his family, I believe.
But nobody else did anything.
Well, I think there are several other cases, but this is the one because the government did admit wrongfully deporting him. But we're missing the point here. I think the details of the case are actually irrelevant. It doesn't matter if he's the worst gangbanger on the planet. It doesn't matter if he murdered 50 people. It doesn't matter any of that stuff because he was not given his day in court.
Well,
without due process, without being allowed to have your day in court, you are not a citizen. You don't have any rights. You are whatever the nearest law enforcement agent says you are, for better or worse.
Right. Now the tricky word is due process.
Yes.
So the question is how that's defined. It could well. I was making the case. Maybe a person is going to sit in a chair and just whatever and sit there.
And that would be due process.
That's right. You got 1 minute. Well, I think you're a citizen. The prosecutor says, this guy's obviously not a citizen. Any defense? A mumble. Well, okay, all right, go. You're out.
No, in many immigration proceedings, you're not even afforded a translator for many places.
Right.
So you have children who don't speak English.
And finally, I'm sort of finally getting into the Trump story here with the legal. So the courts are saying there could well be a substantial problem on this, and I use the word advisedly. I mean, it's an advised word, but there are some enormous number of people that's far past our normal immigration arrangements. And you could say the country has the right to police its borders. If you imagine it's a country, it might really not be one. It might be an economic zone. It could be a lot of things.
It is a state.
It could be a state,
entity.
but not a nation. It could be a state.
Yeah, we're not a nation. We are not a nation state, but we are a state.
Which is a major thing people haven't realized. So understanding they don't live in a nation is quite a problem for people, and that's one of the issues that's occurred over time. And the issue is even more exacerbated by different cultures.
Well, actually, ideas. In many ways, this is a whole separate conversation. But I would actually argue we're more of a nation today than we were 150 years ago, because depending on how you define, the American dream is close thing to a civic nationalism this country has. From an ethno-nationalist perspective, we've always been a multinational empire in many ways, but the definition of who falls under what group has actually broadened. 100 years ago, Italians and Irish people weren't white. Now they are.
Maybe 150. And so, the issue of the melting pot deals. I'm not going to...
It's a whole separate question.
Back to judges.
The point being here is that our system is fundamentally flawed. I contend we need to completely overhaul our immigration system. We need a common sense immigration plan that expands the court's ability to process these vast number of claims so we can give these people the due process they are constitutionally required to, and police our borders in a way that we don't have people released for 10 years because it's going to take that long to get their day in court.
Right. So I can take your point. So for whatever reason, the border seems to have slammed shut. It may be yes, maybe no. But maybe people are overstaying visas. Maybe that's the way to come in. I don't know. But I'll let it go at that. Certainly, what President Trump is doing on this point, and you could go into birthright citizenship, all these things. So I want to, in many ways, change the ethnicity of the country or restore the earlier ethnicity. And the government, and we get into the court issues. So he's doing all these things that are atypical for what's been going on the past 20 or 30 years. And there are legal restraints that President Trump tends to violate.
Yes.
And so the courts are on many, many policies. Many of them are enforcing injunctions on all sorts of issues, on many, many, many of his policies. And the question comes up as we sort of got into a long conversation about immigration or whatever's going on, and it's a big problem, and how is Trump managing this, and the way he's managing it, and I think I can accept this idea that well, I want that guy out of the country, due process, I'm not going to worry about it. And so the bigger issue are these broader questions about the sort of the bricks and mortar of our national identity.
Yes.
So how are we going to handle that? Well, it's impractical, is it? I don't know. But the idea, at least the facade of doing that. So I'll let it go with that. And also the number of judges we have, the amount of money that goes into legal arrangements, particularly for this problem. And one of the other issues is the whole legal arrangement is many ways depends on money. So if none of these people have money, pretty much no one has money, then the legal system is going to be prima facie inadequate.
Yes.
And
they largely depend on pro bono representation.
One of the issues that goes up there is the way the Constitution may or may not work. So one way that Trump could accomplish this is sort of a wink-wink thing with these people sitting at the desk and 300 people coming through one after the other, maybe. But and I don't know if you could make the case.
That would be, I would say, unjust, but it would be constitutional.
Well, I mean,
I think
that's just getting off that subject a little bit. Really, that's an example of what Trump's up to here. And the courts on other fronts, many other fronts, are issuing injunctions, and federal district courts are doing that. And one story that's out there is so many policies that Trump has undertaken, which are a little bit different because he's not depending on Congress to do things. These are not laws; these are executive orders, and the courts are responding in districts. And I think it's fair to say there's some judge shopping that goes on, particularly with the tariffs. Governor Newsom in California is brought a case before a Trump-appointed federal judge, a lady judge, so to speak. I mean, I would imagine that she's at least the expectation is that she's going to have a liberal event,
well,
and the judge.
She's Trump appointed. She doesn't.
No, excuse me. It's Biden. It's Biden. It's Biden. Yeah, it's Biden. Which is a point, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if we believe that the judge, which is a bad thing, so if you think whatever justice you have, it depends on whether it's a Democratic or Republican judge, and if you're in a jury trial, what group of political followers are in the jury pool. So, OJ, whatever, I don't know, whatever people are picking jury pools that are going to produce a particular result. Same with judges. And so right now, in the middle of this huge event in the country, there's a lot of judge shopping. And this is one that's in San Francisco. Yes. And this judge can basically, as I understand it, could, if it gets to this point, and the idea is on May 22nd, there's going to be a hearing to see if this is the appropriate venue for this trial, and said it should go to Washington. I think there's some court on foreign trade.
Yeah, the Court of International Trade.
Right. So is that going to be the appropriate venue? And the judge can presumably decide, particularly if there's enough of feeling, I'm the person that can save the world right now. I can say, no, it's going to come here, but of course it would be appealed. But if it's possible that they get into some kind of courtroom, then presumably this extraordinary event will take place. And that goes on all kinds of issues.
Yes.
So the question to ask
is
injunctions. Yeah, well, that's true.
Republicans judge shop for abortion cases
Absolutely,
and gun rights
you're totally
cases.
right. You're totally right, and so that's right. So everyone's judge shopping, and is it possible for, and it's presumably so, the judges are issuing huge injunctions, and this is like a bench trial. They sit there. I want to hear the evidence. I'm a person sitting here. I've got my predispositions, and this is for some kind of world event. I don't know, or I don't know, or in whatever extreme thing you could think of. Probably the tariffs are really extreme, but there are many other things that are out there. I'm going to stop the government from firing people.
Yep, that was the case.
Right. You're executive and you fired 12 million people or whatever, and you're the president. They work for you, and what sort of rights do they have to stop this? And it's particularly true if you're a new hire or you haven't gotten your full privileges. So you could say whatever, and this seems to be what's happening. I don't know how many injunctions have been issued, but is this the way the country needs to go, so to speak? And could this be? It appears to me it could easily be abused if we have really politicized judges that are out there on each side. Yep. And I think one of the issues that I don't think Trump totally, or his followers don't totally understand this, but in my opinion, if extreme policies are present and that many constituencies are offended, then it would be quite easy for the country to flip the other way, to the Democrats, and the Democrats to be in power for a long time and to use the same methodology that President Trump is using. To just say, well, we're now going to do these, I don't know, whatever things could be thought of to really abridge the system. And
we're going to gut the Second Amendment. We're going to gut.
The Democrats could do it just. The Democrats could do it just as well.
Yeah.
That's if the courts don't step up to protect the Constitution. And I'll say that's a real substantial problem.
Yeah.
The other point that's appearing is, once again, the Democrats want to impeach President Trump. So we're into this sort of unpleasant situation for the country. And particularly so, at least my opinion is, that the nature of the country, the power of the country has been substantially diminished, as witnessed by the weakening dollar, the rise of the price of gold, the other countries not reposing confidence in the U.S. So the U.S. is the linchpin of NATO. Well, no, we're not going to really do anything because it's too expensive. And it's a real difficult arrangement, I would say. Do you think the thing to do, what would you say the thing to do right now would be? Obviously, there are many policies of which you disapprove.
Yes.
And many that I do as well. Some I don't disapprove of, some I don't, but some I do. And what can one do? Presumably, you could have an impact with your congressman. You could say that would be something to do.
Yes.
It's a very precariously paused and that would be presumably that's what's going to happen. There'd be some kind of restraint. Was there just the same kind of restraint that was on Franklin Roosevelt? Though in that circumstance, you could really say there was an absolute crisis. So when President Trump is going after emergency regulation, that's quite different than the situation Franklin Roosevelt faced.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, okay, Harry, once again, I'm going to let you say, what should a good person do under these circumstances?
First, don't lose hope. In the sense that I think it's very tended to be overwhelmed by everything going on. It's always bad news all the time. Even if on both sides of the ideological spectrum, it's bad news all the time, right? One, this country is founded fundamentally on hope. And so don't give up hope in the process. And I think in terms of practical things you can do, stay on your congressman, go to town halls, write your senators, be a thorn in their side as much as possible to make sure your voice is heard as a constituent. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, other people you don't normally talk to, have conversations and build community awareness of things. And just keep an eye on the horizon, because this too shall pass.
Yes, indeed. Well, all right. On that note, Harry, thank you for the wisdom of a younger person. At least
Thank you
that's
for
good.
having
I mean,
me.
you're not in your 80s yet, but okay. Well, thank you for being here, Harry. Thanks
Thank
a
you for
lot.
having
Thank
me,
you.
sir.
Thank you. Right.